On this week's GTA 6 o'clock, an exclusive interview with an ex-GTA developer, how the map is designed around gameplay,
they're in their heads, they're like, this is the city.
The mysteries of GTA Easter eggs.
I assume you're familiar, like the Mount Chiliad mystery.
Yeah.
And the extra content hiding behind main missions.
I'd say 99% of people never saw that.
It's all here on this week's GTA 6 o'clock. Yes, hello and welcome to episode 47 of GTA 6 o'clock, the world's most in-depth and best connected GTA 6 show. And today's episode is one of those that hopefully backs up that statement, as we have an exclusive interview with Ben Hinchcliffe, an ex-Rockstar designer and developer who's worked on GTA Chinatown Wars, LA Noire, GTA 5, GTA Online, Red Dead Redemption 2, and yes, GTA 6. I am your host, James JJ Jarvis, and this week, as you might have gathered, things are a little bit different. There is, of course, that Take-Two earnings call that will be held on November 6th, which is only a week away now, and we might get something GTA 6 shaped around then. But for this week, as I just mentioned, and to tide you over to that, I have sent Dan away to interview Ben Hinchcliffe, who is now the lead design at Just Add Water, but was previously a game designer at Rockstar Games. The interview you are about to hear was conducted virtually via a video call, and, of course, as always, any statements made during this interview are Ben's personal experiences while he was working at Rockstar, and, as such, only relate to his specific time there. But, with all that housekeeping done, we can jump right into it, and I will be back at the end to wrap things up.
Yeah, just on that note then, please could you introduce yourself to the audience and explain what you do?
So I'm Ben Hinchcliffe. I'm lead design at Just Add Water, formerly Rockstar Games.
And can you tell me, like, what period were you at Rockstar Games, and like what were you doing in your role there?
Yeah, so I was at Rockstar Games for around 13 years. I actually came straight out of university and went straight into Rockstar Games. So it was my first job in the games industry, which was pretty crazy because I've never heard of anyone going from that straight away into Rockstar. They've always kind of built their way up to get into Rockstar. And I was part of the design team there. This is at Rockstar Leeds. I did a little bit of time at Rockstar North as well. And I kind of started off in obviously a junior design role, and over the 13 years kind of worked my way up. And worked on numerous projects over those 13 years before I ended up leaving.
I imagine a lot of the audience would be keen to know, like, what role did you enter on? And then by the time you left Rockstar, what was your position then?
Yeah. So I went in as like bottom line kind of junior, and that was because I just had no experience, obviously, in the industry whatsoever. I didn't even know how to code when I joined. And a requirement for a lot of the designers at Rockstar are that you know how to do basic code and scripting, kind of like C# scripting. That's how a lot of the missions are made in C# script, and then left on the lead position.
Awesome. And like, when you first applied, what sort of things were you having to say? What do you think made the difference and got you in for the interview?
So I studied at Huddersfield University. I did a computer games design course, and Rockstar Leeds was really, really good at kind of working with universities in the area, especially Huddersfield. Like, we had a lot of guys coming from Rockstar Leeds. We had Ian Bowden, who was art director at Rockstar Leeds. He would come through to our university quite a lot and speak to us. And I just always used to be at the right place at the right time and like speaking to these guys, and made a really good like friendship and relationship with these guys. And then I ended up entering a competition. It was like the final year of university. It was a competition for kind of games design and games technology and games art. It was hosted by Games Republic, who kind of work with a lot of universities. So we entered this competition. We took a game. It was called Full Scale War, which was like a cross between Advance Wars and like Wii Sports mini games. It was like a really random crossover that we did. but it was received really well. Rockstar were there judging the competition. They kind of awarded our game all the top prizes. We won best games design, best team, best art, and it just kind of swept the floor. And as part of that, the prize for Rockstar was a placement at Rockstar Leeds. So myself and the whole team went and did a placement at Rockstar Leeds. I think it was originally only for like a month. I think it was like a month's placement, maybe 2. But the condition of that was, for them, they were like, well, you need to learn how to program. And if you can learn how to program whilst you're doing this placement, there might be a job at the end of it. And if you don't, well, then sorry, there's a door. So I kind of worked my butt off to learn how to program. I didn't even know what an if statement was, literally nothing, no programming experience whatsoever. So I'd learned how to kind of do this basic C# kind of language programming, did all that. And then of the team of I think there was 5 or 6 of us that ended up getting this placement, I was the only one that was kept on. I was kept on for an additional 3 months after my initial placement. And then after that 3 months, they were kind of like, okay, cheers for your time. And I went back to Scarborough, and I was just kind of like, oh, I don't know what happened. I don't think I got the job. And then a week later, they rang up and were like, oh yeah, we want to offer you a permanent position as a junior designer with us. And I was like, yeah, I'll take that for sure. And jumped at the opportunity. And then, started work a couple of weeks after that, and was there for, 13 years. Crazy. Wow. So that's how I got in. Again, not the usual way anyone gets into the games industry, let alone Rockstar. It was one of those hit so many right notes to just end up where I ended up. So yeah,
that's amazing. And when you began, you said you started with Chinatown Wars. Where was that game in development when you jumped in?
I came on right at the end of that. They'd already released it on the DS, and then they'd just done the PSP port, and then we're just making it over to iPhone. So I'd come in right at the tail end, helped out very minimal on that. I think with a couple of bug fixes. I didn't do any of the mission structure because it was all kind of done and dusted, and it was out the door. But yeah, so that was, I say I kind of worked very loosely, but that's when I came in. The first, obviously, big project for me was LA Noire.
And what was your involvement with LA Noire?
So in LA Noire, on the team, at Leeds, we did a lot of the random character kind of side missions and side character events. So I ended up doing one of the missions where I think I had 2 random character events on that one. One where you kind of chase this guy through a marketplace, and then he ends up getting hit by a truck at the end. And then another one where you're doing you do this police car chase, and he goes down this alleyway, and he goes off a massive hill and crashes his car, gets up onto a roof, and you end up having a shootout up there. So yeah, it was, again, I think most of the team had that kind of structure of 2 to 3 missions apiece, because they were just so big and the game was so big, obviously, that you were quite limited in what you had control over for LA Noire. So yeah.
Coming in as, I guess, quite a junior designer, what was the key difference between the reality of the role you were doing versus maybe what your perception of that role was before you started?
Oh, I mean, I think, I hate to say it, but I don't think universities train people up very well at all for the reality of the games industry. It is just not what they're teaching people, because it's way more technical in terms of needing to script and program, or obviously it was for me at Rockstar. I know other roles can be more kind of theory based, less practical, but yeah, it was very technical, and we ended up using more like an editor, almost like an Unreal Blueprint style system for LA Noire to craft it and make the missions. And again, that was super technical, so having to learn that tool and that engine from scratch was hard, but it's super rewarding to obviously. I think at the initial, when you're trying to learn these tools at the start, it's difficult and you can't really produce much because you're learning the tools. But once you've learned them, as a designer, you're so empowered and free to be able to then just implement this stuff and rapidly prototype things. And it kind of takes the burden away from kind of code and art side, because you have so many tools at your disposal to be able to just do what you want to do. So as a design team, you can just rapid fire out, 10 ideas and then be like, well, these are the best 2, we'll keep these. Those were rubbish.
What was your proudest achievement of working on LA Noire?
Well, obviously that was my first ever big release. And again, big AAA title, working at Rockstar, super hyped just to be there, basically, and working on it. So, yeah, I think my proudest achievement was just literally releasing it. Just getting it out the door was great.
So what was the first Grand Theft Auto game that you worked on, like from a sort of fledgling stage?
Yeah, so that it was GTA 5, where kind of obviously got my hands dirty in that. And again, it was working on the kind of random character missions, some of the main story missions. And later on during that project, as it kind of developed, I transitioned over to the GTA Online team and went up to Rockstar North and spent some time up there working with those guys on GTA Online in the early days, the very first kind of prototypes of that and bits and bobs.
Like all of us really as players, we only get to sample GTA 5 when the fun and the agony of the creation is done.
Yeah.
When you're working inside a studio like that, what are the first stages when a game like GTA 5 is first being talked about and, you know, from ideation? What does that feel like within the studio?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously I think the core starting point is the story you want to tell. And obviously you need to have that down and kind of like what story do you want to tell? What characters are you going to meet? And there's a very kind of loose structure of the characters and stories that obviously the writers want to tell in the game and how that's going to unfold. And then a lot of it, once you've kind of been given a story and the characters, design actually has quite a bit of freedom in terms of maneuverability and of how they want to structure the missions and how they want to tell that story. Normally it'll go through a lot of iteration, right? You'll kind of pitch an initial idea of, you'll go from here to here, you'll see this guy, you'll have a fight, and then that's how the mission's going to play out, and the narrative's kind of woven into that, and that normally it'll go to higher up to kind of the writers and the directors and things, and they'll review it and kind of go, no, we don't really like that angle. Can you either remove this bit or come at us with another idea? And you'll maybe have to have 5 different missions for one story arc or narrative, and kind of it's always about pitching ideas, and then when kind of like maybe 2 get selected or the top one, like I said, those tools that designers have, we are so like free and enabled to be able to rapid prototype it, so we can actually make a rough playthrough of that mission structure, and then that would get reviewed, and obviously it would then get signed off, or it would go back again to the drawing board, and there's a lot of back and forth before it's kind of nailed down, and then that's when all the nice stuff comes in, the animations, the mocap, the audio. Yeah, there's a lot of hurdles you have to jump first before it gets to like full on production state.
Oh, I've got a lot of questions now because I'm quite excited. Do you talk about the story and characters, like driving the missions? Like, does the actual setting, like, is it the setting that comes first, or is it kind of just
I think the setting is all like from the start. The directors at the company knew, and obviously Sam and Dan at the time, they would know where it's going to be set, right? They're in their heads, they're like, this is the city, this is the story we want to tell, these are the characters we kind of want to have, and then it kind of filters down, and then that's when we start kind of coming up with the ideas for doing the missions and how we're going to fill in those blanks.
Sure. And was it the case that like that stuff was like announced all at once, or did it drip through rumors in the company? Or
it kind of drips through, because obviously it always starts very high level, and then it's just about that kind of idea cycle of generating ideas. And again, it might be like, well, I think at one point, like for random characters, it can be like, well, just come up. They say to the design team, just come up with some random characters. Like, what would be fun to do in GTA, and how would a character fit into that? And sometimes characters kind of like naturally formed from that, came out of the back of that with people who just had really good ideas for characters or gameplay, and then it's like, okay, cool, so we could make this, it doesn't really fit with the main story, but it fits as a side character or a side mission that would work, so yeah, we'll use that, and that will kind of get put into the main game.
And you talked about the good stuff coming later on, like the animations and when it looks like the GTA we know.
Yeah.
When you're prototyping design, like what does the game look like to you at that stage?
Very bare bones, obviously. A lot of Yeah, I guess in any games development, right? There's a lot of white boxing, there's a lot of missing assets and hundreds of bugs, things just going absolutely crazy, and you've just got to kind of work with it. But you have enough in place to, again, make the A to B gameplay and kind of. People have to use their imaginations when they're playing your mission. You might be near them and going, oh, so at this point, there's a truck that's going to come flying past and you're going to have to dodge it, but you don't have that yet. But you're just like, imagine if a truck just sped past as you like dived in between. Yeah, it's a lot of that going on.
And are there any missions in GTA 5 that you were like personally attached to that you feel proud of? Or?
So there was one, it's like a random side character mission where it's the Vinewood souvenirs for Mark, where you have to get the golf club from the golfer. So you're kind of doing this like a golf buggy chase through a golf course. And there was a bit of a running joke in LA Noire that when you drove really close to pedestrians, they'd say this line, they'd kind of jump out the way and go, "Wow, this isn't a racetrack." And I tried to get that line into GTA 5 on that mission. So when you jumped over the bridge and you sped past this group of people, they'd like dive out the way, and I like had one of them go, "Hey, this isn't a racetrack," to try and get a bit of like an LA Noire line in. But it kind of got picked up by the writers, and they were like, "No, we're not putting that in."
Oh no! And like, can you talk about? I imagine like a lot of your job is like, I guess, problem solving.
Yeah.
Like, can you talk any examples of like how that works in reality? Like problems you might have had to have tackled and solved.
Yeah. So, I guess you could. Obviously, we have this huge map for these open world games, and it's meticulously planned where content takes place on the map, and to make sure that there isn't any sections of map that is missing content, missing gameplay, because we always want. There was a feel with the games that you always wanted the player, if they went somewhere, there was something to do, or there was something they would find. And sometimes missions would overlap, or there'd be a lot of stuff going on in one particular area, and then it's like, okay, well, how do we move that mission, that character, that gameplay from here to here over at this side of the map? And it might be a completely different land structure, and you've made your whole mission work in this kind of urban environment, and now you're in the desert, and it's kind of like, well, how do you transition that mission from here to here? And then you'd obviously have to rework it in a way that made sense, but without kind of having to do it from scratch, basically. Sometimes that had to happen. Sometimes if it was just like, well, this is like physically not going to work at this location, no matter how much we do, that was always the worst case. You went back to the drawing board and you started again, right? But you would try and make it work in these different locations if you could. Yeah, and it was always that. It's always working with the world, I think. There was a certain element of design being able to request certain changes or structures to the map, or how it was laid out. But a lot of the time, I would say you had to work with the map itself and how it was laid out, because obviously these things are based on real world locations, real world structures, all this kind of stuff. So you were working with what you were given to some regards in terms of street layouts, alleyways, buildings, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you were talking at the start about how kind of the vision for the world and the story was laid out.
Yeah.
How internally, like, what was the ambition of GTA 5? How is it described internally, and how do people understand it? Because I feel like we talk about that on our show a lot, about GTA 5 means this, it's a game about this. But I'm interested in like maybe how that began internally versus how it was perceived when it came out.
Yeah, I mean, the internal vision for 5 was just to go bigger and better, like always go bigger and better, or make it more cinematic, make the player feel like they're in a movie, right? That was the aim, is to just push it in every area, and you'd have kind of the leads of the different departments and directors putting forwards how we can push forwards every single part of the game to the minuscule, just like details on the cars, like suspension, like how the car would tip when it turns corners and tires going down, and just like loads of little things like, well, how can we make the car tires better? How can we make the pedestrians react better? How can we tell the story better? And like the 3 characters as well, that was obviously pivotal, having characters you could switch between again, so we could try and get that the multiple endings and the different character interactions. it was that sense of it was just going to do everything that 4 did better and bigger, basically.
Yeah, and you talked a bit about the interaction and iteration of like problem solving in design, which I imagine is a very specific process. I'm interested in, as someone who spent too much time talking about this stuff, like things in the game, like some of the Easter eggs and the things that captivate the gamer's imagination. So things like, I assume you're familiar, like the Mount Chiliad mystery.
Yeah.
And the mural. Like, how do you, I don't know if this is part of your will, but like, how did that begin life? And to what extent was there like a journey mapped out for the user, and to what extent was it left ambiguous?
Yeah, so unfortunately, that's something I didn't really touch upon. I think that was all more up at the Rockstar North guys that kind of dealt with that. But obviously, there's always a desire to put in these really complex Easter egg hunts and trails that the really dedicated players will follow. And some, as with all Easter eggs, sometimes you just put them in to mess with people. They don't actually do anything. You just mess with people, right? Just to drive them a little bit crazy. But there's in terms of how it evolved and the structure of that, it's more the North guys that did that.
Yeah, sure. And is there anything from your time working there, like where you were seeing the stuff that was being said about the game, where you were thinking, oh wow, they're really off base here? Or...
Oh yeah, all the time. And you just want to, when you just want to comment, you just want to drop a comment on a video and just be like, yeah, but you can't. You're just like, nope, you're not allowed to say anything or do anything. So just leave them to it.
Yeah, well, that's part of the fun, isn't it? I think it's mad people like us spending a lot of time speculating and trying to piece.
Yeah, and it generates that. That buzz, that community of everyone working together, trying to figure something out. And again, it's nice. Again, like you said, it's nice for the audience and nice for people to speculate and talk and figure it out and have these really cool social community groups that are just talking about all this stuff. It's really cool.
Now, you talked about you went to work on GTA Online.
Yeah.
And now it's easy to say, what an incredible success story that's driven, so much for Rockstar, maybe changed the trajectory of GTA as we know it. But like, what was the feeling around that when that first launched? I don't know if you were involved at that stage, but what were the expectations and hopes for it?
Yeah, so I was part of the North team on that, and it was a relatively small kind of team originally that worked on the first iteration of Online that was going to obviously launch with the game. And I think, again, it was of that ethos of trying to do GTA 4 or like the Online just better. Like, how can we do it better in this game? And I think, like you say, there's I don't think there was the expectation of it being as huge as it went in the end. I think it was almost classed as it would be cool for people to do. They'd spend a bit of time on it with their friends, but the main focus would be single player and the story and all that kind of stuff. And then, obviously it just kind of took off, really, really blew up big. And then, big drive to obviously keep people engaged, keep making new content, and keep people, in that world. And it took me by surprise, definitely. Again, I thought the single player would be the mainstay, and Online would be a fun side thing to do. But it really did take off and hooked people more than I definitely expected it to.
Yeah, it's become an absolute phenom. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, absolute beast now. Just crazy how big it is and how engaged people still are, and the amount of content that needs to be created to keep people, just keep them with fresh things to play.
Yeah, for sure. Now we're in theory in a public-facing way, I guess, like let's say a year away from the next Grand Theft Auto game, GTA 6. Like, with a year to go until a project releases, what would normally be the focus of a dev team at this time?
Well, talking generalities rather than obviously
sure, of course, yeah.
Anything like that. But I'd say a year out on a title that big. You wanting to really tighten it in every corner. So a lot of bug fixing, a lot of Yeah, just nailing stuff down, because there'll be hundreds of side cases. The worst thing, some people might say the best thing about games dev, but I'm going to say the worst thing, is you make the game how you want it to be played and what you want the user to do, and then 90% of your work is actually doing stuff that you don't want them to do. So like you might just want someone to drive in a straight line, drive from A to B, please, just follow that car. And then they don't. They get out of the car, or they drive over there, or they shoot this person, or they turn around and go the other way. And it's just like, can you just do what the objective is telling you to do, please? Like that is, but they don't, because people like to mess around and they like to do things differently. So literally 90% of games dev is either stopping the player doing what you don't want them to do, or accommodating that decision from the player that only a minute detail, 10% of the people might try, but those people will try it, and you have to accommodate that. And in my opinion, good games are games that don't block the player or stop them, but actually allow them to do what they want to do, and it still works. So if you want to, I don't know, we tell you to shoot this guy with a sniper rifle from miles away, but you decide to, I don't know, get a helicopter and drop a crate on him instead, and he dies. You've still completed the mission objective. It's still going to say, cool, you've done it. You just didn't do it in the way we told you to do it, but it handles it. That's in my opinion what makes GTA games what they are, is that freedom that it allows the player, and the game will still handle it and still allow the player to do these weird things.
I think this is really fascinating for me, because I think there's a lot of games that you don't realise you're being manipulated.
Yeah.
You have the illusion of free will, but you're actually being invisibly signposted to what you need to do. Are there any kind of game design tricks or things you would go to within your GTA mission design to keep people on track?
I mean, there's obviously stuff you can do. You'll see on some missions you play, it will say, some missions we want you to play it a certain way, like you have to, or it would full on just break the mission or break the flow. So obviously there's some missions where we tell you to tail someone. If you get too close, you fail it because you spotted, or you fall too far behind, you'd fail it because you lost them. So things like that, very easy to do. You just kind of fail the player if they get too close or too far away. If there's a certain place we want you to go to, we'd normally lock you in on like a walking path. I think we did it a lot in Red Dead 2, where the player would be walking and then they're kind of on a path, and then all you can really do is press forwards. And if you pull back or press anything, nothing happens. You just press forwards and you keep walking forwards, so we can get you to like a specific location. So at some points we have techniques like that, like failures of going too far, or navigation paths where we'll make sure you have to be in a set location. But for the more open missions where we might say, just go to this location and kill everyone, you can do that in like any way you want, and the game will handle it. And there's lots of instances, especially in kind of Red Dead 2, where there'd be extra content in the game specifically made for if the players didn't do as they were told, because it was like cool for them to see extra stuff if they didn't. So one example would be, I think it's the moonshine mission in Red Dead 2, where there's a moonshine wagon and it's coming from the top of the map down to the big city in the bottom right. Can't remember what the bloody hell the name is now. Anyway, a moonshine wagon coming down there, and you've got to go meet it in the middle. And if you just follow it, you're supposed to ambush it on the bridge. And if you ambush it on the bridge, cool, you get it, you jump on it, take it back. I think it's for Ride the Lightning mission, where you've got to take it to the professor. It is that one, because he has to fuel his chair with the moonshine. If you don't ambush it on the bridge when you're told to, and you follow it along the road for quite some time, it will end up at like a bandit camp. And there's a full camp there with enemies doing their animations. The guys get off the wagon, they'll go to the tents and do some animation and all this stuff. And literally, like, I'd say 99% of people never saw that, because they would ambush the wagon where they were told on the bridge. But again, it was that thing of, well, what if you don't do that? Where's it going? Like, what's the story behind it? Why is it going from here to here? So it was always that like extra narrative you had to put in of, if you didn't do, if this was just a world and it's living, what would that thing actually be doing if you didn't do anything to it? So you had to almost build in these what ifs, a lot of what ifs, and like I say, and that's what makes Rockstar's games so good, is all that additional detail and content they put into everything that players probably aren't even aware it's there. They just don't know it exists, but it does for the people who just play it a little bit different.
I think that's a really fascinating point, and it's something I've probably argued about on the show, is that it's that level of craft and detail that I can only imagine for someone like yourself, it probably is a lot, where someone goes, can we just make that village that 1% of the audience might see, and it's fully like how do those sort of is it like built into the psyche of the studio that everyone buys into that, or is it that people have to be romanced on the idea of
I think it initially gets worked in at the start when you're just trying to prototype a mission, right? And you're trying to just make the bare bones white box of a mission. You won't have built in XYZ paths, all these like what ifs, and that will come out in the churn of like maybe QA playing it, and they'll go, well, I was told to do this and I ran over here and the mission just completely broke. So then you kind of like, right, okay, well, I need to now design something or make something happen differently if the player does that. So a lot of it came through the QA cycle of like QA breaking the missions in different ways, and then us having to find clever design solutions to either work in new gameplay or just like outright stop the player from doing that thing. If we thought it was like they could do something that was just too destructive to the mission, we'd just like put an end to it and be like, well, no, you went away, this person escaped. But if we could accommodate it, we would try to accommodate it in terms of a design way of doing something clever.
Was there anything that was like, whether in GTA 5 or Red Dead, where maybe there was an ambition that everyone wanted to do, but it just got cut for reasons of real life and practicality and demand?
I think that's every game, every big budget game, is just, there's 100 ideas on the table and 20 make it, right? That's just the reality of cutting content and shaping the game to be the best it can be, because only the top tier content and the top ideas are kind of kept, just to make sure the game is, top notch. And then again, just time, right? You just think, well, what does having all this stuff add to the game? Does it add something fun for the player to do? And maybe not. And you just sometimes have to be super brutal and just like cut some of this stuff, and really focus in on what you think are interesting and good gameplay to like stories to tell and gameplay to let the player experience.
So at what time did you leave Rockstar? What year was it?
So 2.5 years ago. So what's that now? We're talking 2021. Yeah, just before COVID, right? No, we were in COVID because we were at work from home. Yeah, and then left. Yeah, that's right. So during, I think, man, that COVID black hole time is just like you lose all sense.
I'm the same. I put like a mental plus 18 months in anyone I've met. Like, have we seen each other recently?
Yeah,
have we?
it's
I don't know.
like, yeah. It's crazy.
That's wild. So I guess that you'd have been part of the journey from the inception of GTA 6, but then on the outside when the GTA 6 trailer launched.
Yes, on the outside.
How did it feel? How did it feel being outside of it and seeing like not GTA 6 for the first time, but in a public-facing way?
Obviously, super excited to see a trailer come out, for it to be shown off to the public, and for the team to have kind of like their work gratificated and people celebrating it, and but like the trailer to break all those YouTube views and like some just breaking kind of, what would you say, like breaking stats and stuff already before it's even come out, like really good to see it come out. What
prompted you to leave Rockstar, and then how does that take you to where you are today?
So I'd obviously been there quite a long time. 13 years is a long time to spend at kind of any place, really. And I'd done LA Noire, I'd done a GTA game, I'd done a Red Dead game. so I'd kind of ticked off the main ones for me in terms of like IP that Rockstar does. And I just started. I think I just bought myself a Quest 2, and tried some VR. I jumped into Half-Life Alyx in VR, and it just kind of blew my mind. I played it and it just completely blew me away. And at that point, I couldn't really stop thinking about Half-Life Alyx and VR and the interactions and what could be done with the interactions and that different view space. It just felt like really new and fresh. And from that point on, I was just kind of like, I think I kind of want to work in VR. Like, I think that's something I want to try. And obviously, at Rockstar VR, we not traditionally making VR stuff. We did the LA Noire VR stuff, little bits and bobs, but I just couldn't see the opportunity there to do it, large scale. So I just thought, well, yeah, that's me kind of done then. At that point, it was a very like 1 week I was like, there, cool. The week after I'd played that, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna leave. And I was just kind of like gonna call it there. And at that point, Just Had Water, which is where I'm at now. They've been going for absolutely, ages. Done some fantastic work in the past, like the Abe's Odyssey stuff, and some other games. They just released Sniper Elite VR, working with Rebellion to do that, and they just finished that project. And then their owner, unfortunately, got COVID and died from COVID. So the studio went through a bit of a massive shock. The owner kind of passed. Loads of people then left the studio. It was kind of on its knees a little bit. There was not too many people left, and I was just kind of wanting to get out of Rockstar. And Just Had Water needed a lead design. Basically, those two roads just kind of like met. So I went into Just Had Water and did the interview, and I was like, "Look, I'm kind of big on VR. You've just done Sniper Elite VR. I'd like to come work for you guys and do some more VR if that's what you're doing." And they were like, "Yep, that's the current plan for us." Obviously, told me about the passing and it was at a difficult period for the company, but I thought, yeah, I'll still join because why not? I'll take a risk and do something different. And then obviously went from massive, arguably the biggest AAA studio in the industry, to very kind of small level indie studio, which was a massive change in gears in terms of the role and the day to day. At Rockstar, it's very much you kind of have ownership of your area, and there's everyone else has ownerships of their area, and there's a really big structure in terms of leads and directors and everything else. And then you go to a smaller indie studio and there's just not that many of you, and it's really flat structure, and you can get all your ideas out and have way more control, more of a full game sense. So that's how that all kind of happened. And at the moment, we're currently working on a game called Dig VR, which is due for release on November 14th. And it's kind of like a sim-like arcadey excavator game where you control a digger, very much in the vein of Power Wash Simulator. We're kind of going down that like cozy sim-like feel, arcadey feel. But yeah, you get to drive an excavator and you get to do bowling with an excavator, hook a duck, but then you do other stuff like digging up dirt or cutting down trees. You've got loads of different tool heads and things. And I'm really enjoying it. There's so many new challenges and like design things that you just don't consider when working on a traditional flat screen game that come up in VR. And that's what I really like. That's what I actually love about the VR space, is the new challenges that are presented and the things that we still need to overcome.
What do you think are like the biggest misconceptions about VR gaming?
That's a good question. I think there's a lot of different points. I think one is that there's no good games. in VR, or that all the games in VR are for kids or small little 10-minute throwaway games. I think that's the biggest misconception. I think is that it's not. I don't know. It's not real. It's not real games. It's not real gaming. It's kind of like a big misconception. But obviously, you've got things like Half-Life Alyx on kind of PC VR. We've got Batman that just came out yesterday. Batman Arkham Shadow in VR came out today. Sorry, which is getting critical praise everywhere. We've got Metro coming to VR. We've got Behemoth coming to VR. We've got Alien Rogue Incursion coming to VR. So and we had Assassin's Creed Nexus in VR. So there's a lot of these big IPs in VR that are massive campaigns. You're talking 20 hours for something like Assassin's Creed and Asgard's Wrath 2 for like a big 40-hour RPG. So VR has these big mainstream titles in there. For me, I think that's the biggest misconception, that those don't exist when they do.
And like, what headsets is your game compatible with, and does that change the experience between platforms?
Yeah, so obviously, again, I think you talk about VR. There's a huge chasm between those headsets. So you've got your PC VR headsets, which obviously those games look incredible because it's using a PC to run it. So of course they're going to look incredible because it's a PC. And then you've got stuff like the Quest. So the Meta Quest headset is like the best selling headset so far. The Quest 2 and the Quest 3, and obviously the 3S that they've just launched. Some of the biggest selling headsets. There's 20 million Quest 2 headsets in the market, which is quite a lot of headsets. And our game is compatible currently with the standalone Meta Quest devices. So Quest 2, Quest 3, Quest 3S, and Quest Pro is where our game will be. And obviously with that standalone technology, it comes at a cost to graphical kind of fidelity, right? The running joke is that the Meta Quest is a mobile phone strapped to your face, because that's really what the internals are, is like a high-powered mobile phone. So you have to work with the hardware, work with the limitations. So because of that, the graphical fidelity of our game, Dig VR, is more stylized, more cartoonish. And we had to do that because we have like a fully dynamic terrain. So when you dig the terrain and dump it, you're actually moving the dirt and dumping it out. And that takes quite a lot of processing power for the headset to do. So we had to bring our graphical quality down to support the dynamic terrain. So you have to, again, that's like one of the main challenges in VR, is working with the hardware limitations that you don't necessarily have on next-gen consoles and PC. You can kind of do whatever you want and have dynamic lighting and all this amazing looking graphics. But when you're working on kind of Quest on standalone headsets, you really have to kind of know how to maximize the hardware and get every last drop out of it.
I know that the game just got delayed, didn't it, by a few weeks?
Yes,
we blamed Batman. Is that right?
Because of Batman, we blame Batman. Yeah, that's right. We didn't want to clash with Batman's launch window, because again, being on the other side of it, I know what it's like when we launch a big game and everyone just moves out of the way completely. So we had the same thing here. I was like, look, Batman is pretty big. It's gonna eat all the news cycle for VR. It'll just suck up everything. So we just need to get out of its way. So that's what we did.
I was hoping you could, because a lot of the audience will be, I guess, like console players or PC players who are very much in the, looking forward to GTA.
Yeah.
What would you say to those people to encourage them to give Dig VR a chance? What could they find appealing about the game?
I mean, when I kind of talk about VR, and I always kind of hark back to the old days of, when games didn't have the graphics to win over an audience, like the NES and the SNES and the Mega Drive and these kind of consoles had to rely on gameplay. The gameplay had to be fun, and the gameplay, had to be engaging. And that's what we've done with Dig VR. Obviously I'm going to say I think the game's great and that the gameplay is really good and engaging, but I think people just need to kind of shift a mindset of not graphics first, but gameplay first. And in my opinion, gameplay is always king. Gameplay will always top and trump graphics, even if you're talking on consoles, right? We've had some games that have looked absolutely stunning in PC and console, but the gameplay's been flat and it's just been rubbish. But people are suckered in and they're drawn in by the visuals, and then they play it and think, there's not much substance, kind of wasted my money, not great. So yeah, I would kind of say, check out Dig VR. Yes, the graphics might not look like the top end consoles or PC, but the gameplay is what's going to hook you and keep you coming back. So, give it a go, try the gameplay, and hopefully you'll find something really enjoyable.
That's great. And just a final question, I guess, for our GTA audience.
Yeah.
Now you're on the outside looking in. Like, what are you most excited about with GTA 6?
I think just seeing when I left, where it was, and playing that final version, how much, if anything, has changed, how much things have changed. Obviously I was privy to a lot of new things and content and story and stuff, so I'd just love to know how that's evolved and how it's come out at the other end, and I just can't wait to play it. I'm really, really looking forward to it. Really looking forward to it.
And without naming any names or saying any things, do you think people are going to be surprised by what Rockstar eventually got to show when they start to show more of their full hand?
Yeah, I mean, you only have to look at, how every game Rockstar has done has evolved in some way. And you could argue, like that mantra before, that every element of the game moves forwards in terms of it feeling more realistic and people acting and behaving more realistic as every game has iterated through each cycle. So I just think people, again, it will blow people away. It will sell an absolute ton, as it always does, right? People will be talking about it for ages afterwards, just like they did with GTA 5. And yeah, I'm really, really excited for people to get their hands on it and get in and play it. Just because I think they've raised the bar again. Just they always do, and I just think they have done again with GTA 6.
And we are back in the studio. Thanks again to Ben, whose new game, Dig VR, in which you can do all kinds of things with a digger, including, as you heard, hook a duck, bowling, and of course digging, is out on November 14th. So if you have a Quest headset and fancy taking control of a dig or two, go and check that out for sure. I do hope you enjoyed the chat with Ben. There's certainly a few things there that he talked about that will be worth digging into next week. So we'll bring you a proper analysis then, along with all the usual GTA 6 discussions. So please let us know if you'd like more interviews and things like this in the comments. Get in touch with us on Twitter at GTAVOclock. Drop us an email, gtavio'clock@gmail.com, and subscribe to the channel on YouTube. And we will be back next week at 6 p.m. for another episode of GTA 6 O'Clock.